The morning sun painted the sky orange over New Sol Colony on the planet Kepler 442b. Ji-won Kim stood on his ranch porch, coffee cup in hand, watching his cattle move slowly across the grassland. The animals were special hybrids, built to breathe the thin air of this frontier world. They were his life's work, and he knew every single one by sight. Ji-won was 47 years old and had lived on this ranch for 15 years. People in town called him the silent rancher because he spoke only when necessary. His words were few, but when he talked, people listened. He had built his ranch from nothing, working alone until 6 months ago when everything changed. That was when Mira Choi arrived at his door. Mira was not human. She belonged to a race called the Zilithians. Her skin had a soft blue tint that caught the light, and her eyes were larger than human eyes, colored like deep purple gems. The Zilithians were known across the galaxy for their healing abilities and gentle nature. They had lived peaceful lives on their home planet until the big mining companies came and destroyed their world. Now thousands of Zilithians lived as refugees across human colonies, trying to build new lives far from home. Mira had knocked on Ji-won's door 6 months ago, thin and scared, asking for work. She spoke good English, but with a musical accent that made even simple words sound beautiful. Ji-won needed help with cooking and cleaning, so he hired her. She worked hard and never complained, even when the work was difficult. But this morning, something was wrong. Ji-won watched Mira walk from the house to the barn, carrying feed for the smaller animals. Her steps were different. She moved carefully, like someone trying not to show pain. Her left leg seemed stiff, and she put less weight on it with each step. "Mira," Ji-won called out. His voice was deep but not loud. "You okay?" She turned and smiled, but the smile looked forced. "Yes, Mr. Kim, just tired today." Ji-won studied her face. In his years of working with animals, he had learned to read body language. Animals could not lie with words, so they showed truth through their movements. People were not so different. Mira's smile was real, but her eyes showed something else. Fear, maybe. Or pain. "Your leg," he said simply. Mira looked down at her left leg, then back at him. "I hit it on the cleaning cabinet yesterday. Very clumsy of me." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Zilithian healing is good, but not instant for everything." Ji-won nodded slowly. Zilithians were famous for healing faster than humans. A bump from furniture should not cause this kind of walking problem, especially not for a full day. "Be careful," he said. "Take breaks when you need them." "Thank you, Mr. Kim." She continued to the barn, still walking with that careful, painful gait. Ji-won watched her go, his coffee growing cold in his hands. Something was not right, but pushing for answers would not help. Mira would tell him when she was ready, or she would not tell him at all. Either way, he would watch and wait. The next few days brought more small signs. Mira moved slower than usual. She favored her right side when carrying heavy things. Sometimes she winced when she thought no one was looking. Most people would not notice these tiny changes, but Ji-won noticed everything. On Thursday, they made their weekly trip to town for supplies. New Sol Colony was small, just a few thousand people spread across a valley between two mountain ranges. The main street had a general store, a medical clinic, a sheriff's office, and 3 restaurants that served food from Earth and other worlds. Mira sat quietly in the passenger seat of Ji-won's truck as they drove into town. She wore a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm weather, and Ji-won noticed she pulled the sleeves down to cover her wrists. They parked outside Peterson's general store. The owner, an old man named Bill Peterson, greeted them with a wave. He was one of the original colonists and knew everyone in town. "Morning, Ji-won." "Hello there, Mira. How are you folks doing out on the ranch?" "Good," Ji-won replied. "Need some fence wire and cattle medicine." While Ji-won talked with Bill about ranch supplies, Mira gathered household items from the shelves. Soap, cleaning materials, and food for their meals. She moved through the store efficiently, but Ji-won kept one eye on her movements. That was when he saw Deputy Tae-ho Yoon. The deputy sheriff walked into the store like he owned it. He was a big man with thick arms and a face that always looked angry. His uniform was clean but tight across his belly. Some of the other customers moved away when they saw him, finding reasons to shop in different aisles. Yoon's eyes found Mira immediately. He walked over to where she was selecting vegetables, standing closer than necessary. "Well, well," Yoon said loud enough for others to hear. "If it isn't our blue friend." "How are you doing, Mira?" Mira's whole body went rigid. She kept her eyes on the vegetables, but her hands shook slightly. I am well, Deputy Yoon, thank you. That's good to hear. Yoon picked up an apple and bit into it without paying. You know, I was thinking about our conversation last week. Have you given it more thought? Yes, I am still thinking. Well, don't think too long. Some opportunities don't wait forever. Jiwon could not hear everything they said, but he could see enough. Mira's fear was obvious in every line of her body. She stood like a small animal, trying not to attract a predator's attention. Deputy Yoon stood too close, spoke too quietly, and smiled in a way that had nothing friendly about it. When Yoon finally walked away, Mira stood still for a long moment before continuing her shopping. Her hands were shaking worse now. Jiwon finished buying his supplies and met Mira at the truck. She was already sitting in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. They drove home in silence. Jiwon's mind worked through what he had seen. Deputy Yoon had some kind of hold over Mira, something that scared her badly. The deputy's behavior was not professional or friendly. It was threatening. Back at the ranch, Mira went straight to work preparing lunch. She moved around the kitchen with purpose, but Jiwon noticed she kept the sleeves of her shirt pulled down. When she reached up to get plates from a high shelf, the sleeve pulled back slightly. Jiwon saw dark marks on her wrist that looked like fingerprints. That evening, after the cattle were fed and the daily work was done, Jiwon sat on his porch thinking. The sunset turned the sky purple and gold, and the first stars appeared overhead. Mira had finished her work and gone to her small room in the back of the house. Jiwon was not a man who acted quickly or without thinking. He had learned patience from working with animals and from living alone on the frontier. But he was also not a man who ignored problems when he saw them. Someone was hurting Mira. Someone with authority and power was using that power to threaten and harm a refugee who had no way to fight back. The evidence was small but clear to anyone who knew how to look. Jiwon Kim was very good at looking. He finished his coffee and stood up from his chair. Tomorrow he would start watching more carefully. He would ask quiet questions and listen to the answers. He would learn the truth about what was happening to Mira, and then he would decide what to do about it. The stars grew brighter in the alien sky above his ranch. Somewhere in the house, Mira was probably lying awake, scared and alone. But she was not as alone as she thought. Jiwon Kim was watching now. And when the silent rancher started watching, things had a way of changing. The next morning, Jiwon Kim woke before sunrise. He made his coffee and sat on his porch thinking about what he had seen in town. The bruises on Mira's wrist looked like someone had grabbed her hard. The fear in her eyes when Deputy Yoon spoke to her was real and deep. Jiwon was a patient man, but he was not the kind of person who ignored problems. He had decided to learn the truth about what was happening to Mira, but he would do it carefully and quietly. When Mira came out to start her morning work, she moved the same careful way. Her left leg was still stiff, and she kept her sleeves pulled down to cover her arms. She smiled at Jiwon, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Kim," she said softly. "Morning, Mira. How do you feel today?" "Better, thank you." "The healing is working." Jiwon nodded but said nothing more. Pushing her for answers would only make her more scared. Instead, he would watch and learn. After breakfast, Jiwon drove his truck to the neighboring ranch. His closest neighbor was Young-soo Bae, a Korean man who had arrived on Kepler 442b 2 years after. Jiwon. Young-soo raised different animals and grew crops that could survive. In the thin air, Young-soo was working in his garden when Jiwon arrived. He was a friendly man who talked more than Jiwon, but he was also honest and trustworthy. "Jiwon, good to see you. What brings you over here so early?" "Question for you," Jiwon said, getting straight to the point. "You know other Zilithian refugees in town?" Young-soo stopped working and looked at Jiwon with interest. "A few, why do you ask?" "Wondering how they are doing. If they have problems." Young-soo was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Now that you mention it, yes. I have heard some things. Nothing specific, but some of the Zilithians seem scared when they come to town. They stay in groups and avoid certain areas." "Which areas?" "Near the sheriff's office, mainly. And they do not like to shop alone." Young-soo wiped dirt from his hands. "Why, is Mira having problems?" "Maybe. Still learning." Young-soo nodded. He knew Jiwon well enough to understand that the silent rancher would not ask questions without good reason. "If you need help with anything, just ask," Young-soo said. Jiwon thanked his neighbor and drove back to his ranch. He had learned something important. Other Zilithians were also scared, and they were specifically afraid of areas near the sheriff's office. This suggested the problem was bigger than just Mira. That afternoon, Jiwan told Mira he needed to go back to town for more supplies. This was not completely true, but he wanted to observe without her knowing. "I can come with you," Mira offered. "No need. Rest today. Your leg needs more time to heal." Mira looked relieved that she did not have to go to town. This told Jiwan even more about how scared she was. In town, Jiwan parked near the medical clinic and went inside. Dr. Suki Nam was the only doctor in New Seoul Colony. She was a middle-aged Korean woman who had moved to the frontier to help colonists who could not afford expensive medical care on the inner worlds. "Hello, Jiwan," Dr. Nam said when he entered. "What can I do for you today?" "Need to schedule checkups for my workers," Jiwan said. Colony regulations, this was true. All ranch workers needed regular medical examinations to make sure they stayed healthy in the thin air and different gravity of Kepler 442b. "Of course. When would you like to bring them in?" "Just one worker now. Mira Choi. She had a small accident once to make sure everything is healing right." Dr. Nam looked at him carefully. She was a smart woman who had treated many patients over the years. "What kind of accident?" "She said she hit her leg on furniture, but she is walking strange and Zilithians usually heal faster." Dr. Nam was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke more softly. "Jiwan, can I ask you something? Have you noticed any other injuries on Mira? Bruises, cuts, anything like that?" Jiwan studied the doctor's face. Her question suggested she had seen similar things before. "Some marks on her wrist," he said honestly. Dr. Nam nodded slowly. "I have treated several Zilithians in the past year with similar injuries. They all claimed to have accidents, but the injuries did not match their stories." "What kind of injuries?" "Bruises that looked like someone grabbed them. Cuts that seemed deliberate. One young man had broken ribs that he claimed came from falling downstairs." Dr. Nam shook her head. "But when I asked detailed questions, their stories did not make sense." "Did they tell you what really happened?" "No, they were too scared. But I started to notice a pattern. Most of them mentioned having conversations with law enforcement officers before their accidents." Jiwan felt anger growing in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "Which officers?" "I cannot say for certain, but most mentioned Deputy Yoon." Dr. Nam's words confirmed what Jiwan already suspected. Deputy Yoon was hurting Zilithian refugees, and they were too scared to report him because he was a law enforcement officer. "What can be done?" Jiwan asked. "That is the problem. Without victims willing to make official complaints, there is no case, and the refugees are afraid that complaining will make things worse for them." Jiwan thanked Dr. Nam and left the clinic. He now had clear evidence that Deputy Yoon was abusing multiple Zilithian refugees. But as the doctor said, evidence was not enough without victims willing to speak. He walked down Main Street thinking about this problem. As he passed the general store, he saw a group of 3 Zilithians shopping together. They moved quickly and quietly, staying close to each other. When Deputy Yoon's patrol car drove past, all 3 refugees stopped walking and watched the car until it disappeared. Jiwan followed the Zilithians at a distance. They finished their shopping quickly and walked toward the edge of town where many refugees lived in small, cheap apartments. As they walked, Jiwan noticed they took a longer route that avoided passing the sheriff's office. The refugees lived in a rundown building that had been built for temporary housing but now served as permanent homes for people who could not afford better places. Jiwan had never been inside, but he could see that the building needed repairs. He parked his truck and waited. After a few minutes, an older Zilithian man came out of the building. His skin was darker blue than Mira's, and his hair was white with age. He walked with the dignity of someone who had been important before becoming a refugee. Jiwan approached the man carefully. "Excuse me, I am Jiwan Kim. I run a ranch outside town." The old Zilithian studied him with intelligent eyes. "I know who you are. You employ young Mira Choi." "Yes, I am worried about her." The old man looked around to make sure no one was watching them. "Come inside. We should not talk in the open." Jiwan followed him into the building. The inside was cleaner than the outside suggested, but it was clear that many people lived in very small spaces. The old man led him to a tiny apartment with just one room. "I am Elder Jin Hoseo," the man said. "I speak for many of the Zilithians in this colony." "Mira is hurt," Jiwan said simply. "Someone is hurting her." Elder Seo nodded sadly. "We know. Many of our people are being hurt by Deputy Yoon." The elder was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke very softly. We cannot prove anything. But yes, we believe Deputy Yoon is the main problem. He takes money from us and threatens us. Those who cannot pay or who try to resist are hurt. Why do you not report him to the sheriff? Because we are refugees with no power. Who will believe us against a law enforcement officer? And if we complain, he promises to make things much worse for us. Elder Seo sat down heavily in his chair. Deputy Yoon knows we have nowhere else to go. If we are forced to leave this colony, we might not find another place that will accept us. Ji-won understood the terrible situation. The refugees were trapped. They could not fight back against Deputy Yoon because he had all the power, and they could not leave because they had nowhere to go. How many people is he hurting? Ji-won asked. At least 20 families. Maybe more. Some are too scared to tell even us what is happening to them. Ji-won stood up. He had learned what he needed to know. Deputy Yoon was running a system of fear and abuse against people who could not defend themselves. This was not just about Mira anymore. This was about justice for an entire community. Thank you for telling me the truth, Ji-won said. What will you do? Elder Seo asked. Ji-won looked at the old man's hopeful face. I will think about it. As he drove home, Ji-won's mind was busy making plans. He was just one man, but he was not powerless like the refugees. He was a human citizen with rights and connections. And most importantly, he was someone who did not give up when he saw injustice. Deputy Yoon had made a serious mistake. He had hurt someone under Ji-won Kim's protection. Now the silent rancher was going to do something about it. Ji-won Kim spent 3 days thinking about what he had learned. Deputy Yoon was hurting many Zilithian refugees, taking their money and threatening them. The refugees could not fight back because they had no power and nowhere else to go. Most people would have felt helpless against such a problem. Deputy Yoon was a law enforcement officer with authority and weapons. He had the support of other corrupt officials who helped him cover up his crimes. The refugees were scared and would not testify against him, but Ji-won was not most people. He was human, and humans had a reputation across the galaxy for one particular trait. When they saw injustice, they did not give up. They found ways to fight back, even when the odds seemed impossible. On the 4th day, Ji-won began his plan. First, he drove to the electronics store in town. The owner, a young man named Ki-woo Park, specialized in security equipment for ranches and businesses. I need surveillance cameras, Ji-won told him. For your ranch? What kind of system do you want? Small cameras. Hard to see. Good video quality. And they need to record sound too. Ki-woo showed him several options. Ji-won bought 6 tiny cameras that could be hidden easily and would record everything automatically. They were expensive, but money was not important now. Planning to catch cattle thieves? Ki-woo asked as he packed the cameras. Something like that, Ji-won replied. Next, Ji-won visited the colony's communication center. He sent a carefully worded message to his brother Sunwoo, who lived on Earth and worked for the Galactic Justice Department. The message asked for information about legal procedures for reporting corruption in colonial governments. Ji-won did not mention specific names or details in the message. Communication systems could be monitored, and he did not want to warn Deputy Yoon that someone was investigating him. That evening, Ji-won sat with Mira during dinner. She still moved carefully and kept her sleeves pulled down, but she seemed a little less scared than before. Mira, Ji-won said gently, I want to ask you something important. She looked up from her food with worried eyes. If someone was hurting you, and I could stop them safely, would you want me to try? Mira was quiet for a long time. Her hands shook slightly as she set down her fork. Mr. Kim, some problems are too dangerous to fix. Some people have too much power. What if I told you that person was hurting many other people too? Not just you, but your friends and neighbors. Mira's eyes filled with tears. I know about the others. But if we fight back, he will hurt us worse. Or he will force us to leave the colony. Ji-won leaned forward slightly. What if I told you there was a safe way? A way to stop him without putting you or the other refugees in danger. Is there really such a way? Ji-won looked directly into her purple eyes. I believe there is, but I need to know the truth about what happened to you. All of it. Mira was quiet for several minutes. Ji-won waited patiently, letting her make the decision. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Deputy Yoon came to me 3 weeks ago. He said all refugees had to pay protection money to stay in the colony safely. He said bad things would happen to people who did not pay. How much money did he want? 50 credits every week. That is almost all the money I earn working for you. Ji-won felt anger burning in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. What happened when you could not pay? I told him I needed more time to get the money. He grabbed my wrist very hard and said I had one more week. Then last week, when I still could not pay, She stopped talking and touched her leg gently. He hurt your leg? Mira nodded, tears running down her blue cheeks. He kicked me and said next time would be worse. He said he might decide I was not welcome in the colony anymore. Ji-won reached across the table and gently touched her hand. I am sorry that happened to you, and I promise you it will not happen again. But how can you stop him? He is a deputy sheriff. Because I am not afraid of him, and because I have advantages that you and the other refugees do not have. The next morning, Ji-won drove to Elder Seo's building. The old Zilithian was waiting for him as if he had expected this visit. You have decided to help us, Elder Seo said. It was not a question. Yes, but I need something from you and the other refugees. What do you need? I need people to be brave for a short time. I have a plan, but it requires some of you to work with me. Elder Seo listened carefully as Ji-won explained his idea. It was dangerous, but it was also clever. If it worked, Deputy Yoon would be caught in his own trap. How do we know you can protect us if something goes wrong? Elder Seo asked. You do not know that. You have to trust me. Ji-won looked at the old man seriously. But I will tell you this. Humans do not forget when someone hurts people under our protection, and we do not give up. Elder Seo was quiet for a moment. You would risk yourself for people who are not even your own species? Mira is under my protection. She works for me and lives on my land. That makes her my responsibility. Ji-won stood up. And anyone who hurts my people has a problem with me. That afternoon, Ji-won began setting up his cameras. He placed one in the general store, hidden behind canned goods where it could record the area where Deputy Yoon often talked to refugees. Another camera went near the sheriff's office, disguised as part of a streetlight. The most important camera was placed in his truck, hidden in the dashboard where it could record conversations without being noticed. Over the next 2 days, Ji-won visited 3 other ranchers in the area. All of them were human, and all of them had heard rumors about problems with refugees in town. When Ji-won told them what was really happening, they were angry and ready to help. That son of a gun thinks he can abuse people just because they are refugees, said Dae-ho-jung, a cattle rancher who had been on Kepler 442b for 20 years. Not in my colony. What do you need us to do? Asked Hyun Woo-an, who raised crops and hired several Zilithian workers. Ji-won explained his plan. Each rancher would play a small but important part. They would be witnesses and backup support if things went wrong. On the 3rd day, Ji-won received a message from his brother on Earth. The message contained legal information about colonial corruption laws and procedures for reporting crimes to galactic authorities. More importantly, it included contact information for investigators who specialized in cases like this. Everything was ready. Ji-won had cameras recording evidence, rancher friends ready to help, legal knowledge about how to proceed, and most importantly, he had the trust of the refugee community. That evening, he sat with Mira on the porch of his ranch house. The alien sunset painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. Tomorrow we start fighting back, Ji-won told her. Are you sure this will work? Ji-won looked at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I am sure of one thing. Deputy Yoon thinks he can hurt innocent people without consequences. He is about to learn that humans do not allow that to continue. Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, why are you doing this for us? We are not your people. Ji-won turned to look at her. You work for me. You live on my land. You are under my protection. That makes you my people. He stood up and looked out at his ranch, his cattle, and the vast grasslands under the alien stars. And humans protect their people. Always. 2 weeks passed while Ji-won gathered evidence. His hidden cameras recorded Deputy Yoon threatening 3 different Zilithians and taking money from them. The videos clearly showed the deputy's crimes, but Ji-won needed more evidence to build a case that could not be ignored. On Monday morning, a message arrived at Ji-won's ranch. It came from Agent Ji-ho Moon of the Galactic Investigation Bureau. Ji-won's brother on Earth had passed along the information about corruption in New Seoul Colony. Mr. Kim, the message said, I will arrive at your colony tomorrow to investigate the situation you reported. Please meet me at the spaceport at 1400 hours. Come alone and tell no one about this meeting. Ji-won deleted the message immediately. He had expected galactic investigators to get involved eventually, but not this quickly. This was good news, but it also meant his plan had to move faster. That afternoon, Ji-won drove to Elder Seo's building. The old Zilithian was teaching a group of refugee children how to read English when Ji-won arrived. "We need to talk privately," Ji-won said quietly. Elder Seo sent the children to play outside and led Ji-won to his small apartment. "The galactic investigators are coming," Ji-won told him. "Tomorrow," Elder Seo's eyes grew wide. "So soon? Are we ready?" "Almost, but I need one more thing from your community. I need someone brave enough to meet with Deputy Yoon while wearing a recording device. That is very dangerous. If he finds the device, I know. But we need him to confess to his crimes on recording. The camera evidence is good, but a confession would make the case impossible to deny." Elder Seo thought for a long moment. "There is someone who might be willing to help. A young woman named Kira Vel. Her sister works for you." Ji-won was surprised. "Mira has a sister here?" "Yes, Mira has been protecting her by keeping quiet about the sister's existence." "Kira is only 19 years old, but she is brave and smart." "Where is she?" "She works at the textile factory on the edge of town. She uses a different last name to hide her connection to Mira." That evening, Ji-won met Kira Vel at a small restaurant away from the main part of town. She looked like a younger version of Mira, with the same blue skin and purple eyes, but her face showed more anger than fear. "You are the human who employs my sister," she said as soon as Ji-won sat down. "Yes, and you are the sister she has been protecting." Kira's face showed surprise. "She told you about me?" "Elder Seo told me. Mira kept your secret to keep you safe." "Safe from Deputy Yoon, you mean?" Kira's voice was bitter. "He does not know I exist, so he cannot threaten me to control Mira. But you know what he has been doing to her and the others?" "Of course I know. I see the bruises. I see how scared everyone is." Kira clenched her hands into fists. "I hate feeling helpless while that monster hurts my people." Ji-won studied the young Zilithian carefully. She had the same gentle features as her sister, but her eyes burned with controlled anger. This could be useful, but it could also be dangerous. "I have a way to stop him," Ji-won said, "but it requires someone to take a big risk." Kira leaned forward. "What kind of risk?" Ji-won explained his plan. Kira would approach Deputy Yoon and pretend to be a new refugee who wanted to make a deal. She would wear a hidden recording device and try to get him to explain his extortion system on tape. "If he discovers the recording device, he will hurt you badly," Ji-won warned. "And if my plan fails, you could be in danger for a long time." Kira was quiet for several minutes thinking. Finally she spoke. "My sister has suffered for months to protect me. Now it is time for me to take risks to protect her and the others." "Are you sure?" "Yes, but I have one condition. If something goes wrong, you must promise to protect Mira and the other refugees. Do not let them suffer because of my actions." Ji-won nodded. "You have my word." The next day, Agent Ji-ho Moon arrived at the New Seoul Colony spaceport. He was a tall, serious man in his 40s who dressed in plain civilian clothes to avoid attracting attention. Ji-won met him as planned and drove him to the ranch. "Tell me everything," Agent Moon said as they sat in Ji-won's kitchen. Ji-won explained the situation completely. He showed the agent his recorded evidence and introduced him to Mira, who nervously told her story. Agent Moon listened carefully and took detailed notes. "This is worse than I expected," Agent Moon said when they finished. "Deputy Yoon is not working alone. This kind of systematic abuse requires support from other officials." "What do you mean?" "Someone in the colonial government has been covering up complaints and preventing investigations. Deputy Yoon could not operate so openly without protection from above. This was bad news. If corrupt officials were protecting Deputy Yoon, stopping him would be much harder." "How many people are involved?" Ji-won asked. "Unknown. But I suspect the corruption goes up to the colonial administrator level, maybe higher." Agent Moon stood up and walked to the window looking out at the ranch. "Your evidence is good, but we need more. We need to identify all the corrupt officials and get confessions that will hold up in galactic court." "I might have a way to get a confession from Deputy Yoon," Ji-won said. He told Agent Moon about Kira and the plan to record Deputy Yoon explaining his system. Agent Moon looked worried. "That is extremely dangerous. If anything goes wrong, the young woman could be killed. She knows the risks, and she wants to do it." Agent Moon thought for a long time. "If we do this, I want backup plans. Multiple layers of protection." and I want to be personally involved in monitoring the situation. What kind of backup? I will contact Commander Suyung Cha of the Colonial Defense Force. She commands the military unit responsible for this sector. If we can prove corruption in the colonial government, she has authority to intervene. That evening, Commander Cha arrived at the ranch in an unmarked military transport. She was a small but tough-looking woman who spoke with quiet authority. Agent Moon has briefed me on the situation, she said. My soldiers are ready to move if needed, but we must have solid legal evidence before we can act. What happens if the plan goes wrong? Jiwon asked. If Citizen Kira is threatened during the operation, my troops will intervene immediately to protect her. Deputy Yoon and his accomplices will be arrested under military authority. Commander Cha looked directly at Jiwon. But you should know that military intervention will create complications. It will become a much bigger case involving multiple government levels. That might be necessary anyway, Agent Moon said. The corruption appears to involve several colonial officials. They spent the rest of the evening planning the operation. Kira would approach Deputy Yoon the next day at his usual patrol location. She would wear a tiny recording device hidden in her clothing. Agent Moon would monitor the recording from a nearby location, and Commander Cha's soldiers would be positioned to respond quickly if needed. Jiwon would be in his truck with his own recording equipment, close enough to help but far enough away to avoid suspicion. Remember, Agent Moon told everyone, we get one chance at this. If Deputy Yoon becomes suspicious, he will destroy evidence and warn his accomplices. The entire investigation could be ruined. As the meeting ended, Jiwon felt the weight of responsibility. Tomorrow, a brave young Zilithian would risk her life to help bring justice to her community. If anything went wrong, it would be his fault. But as he looked at the determined faces around him, Agent Moon, Commander Cha, and Mira listening from the kitchen doorway, Jiwon felt something else too. Hope. For the first time since this began, they had real power to fight back. Deputy Yoon and his corrupt friends had no idea what was coming for them. The silent rancher was about to become very loud indeed. The morning sun was bright when Kira Vel walked down Main Street toward Deputy Yoon's usual patrol location. She wore simple work clothes and carried a small bag that contained 50 credits, money that Jiwon had given her to make her story believable. Hidden in the lining of her jacket was a recording device so small it could not be seen. 3 blocks away, Jiwon sat in his truck with Agent Moon. They could hear everything through their radio connection to Kira's recording device. Commander Cha and her soldiers waited in unmarked vehicles at both ends of the street, ready to move quickly if something went wrong. Remember, Agent Moon said into his radio, get him to explain the whole system. We need details about how much money, how often, and who else is involved. I understand, Kira replied quietly. Deputy Yoon was standing outside the general store eating a donut and watching people walk by. When he saw Kira approaching, his eyes showed interest. She was young and pretty, and he had never seen her before. Well, hello there, Yoon said as Kira stopped in front of him. I do not think we have met. I'm Deputy Yoon. My name is Kira, she said, making her voice sound nervous and scared. I am new to the colony. I arrived last week. Another refugee, I suppose. Yoon looked her up and down in a way that made Jiwon angry even from 3 blocks away. Where are you staying? In the refugee building on the east side. But I heard that new people need to talk to you about staying safe in the colony. Yoon's smile became predatory. Oh, someone told you about that, did they? Smart friends you have. They said you help protect refugees from problems, but that protection costs money. That is right. This colony can be dangerous for people who do not know how things work here. Yoon stepped closer to Kira. There are bad people who might hurt refugees or cause trouble for them. Lucky for you, I make sure that does not happen. Kira nodded like she believed him. How much does protection cost? For a pretty young thing like you? 50 credits every week. Very reasonable for staying safe and keeping your right to live here. In the truck, Agent Moon was writing down every word. This was exactly the confession they needed. 50 credits is a lot of money for me, Kira said. I only make 60 credits a week at the textile factory. Well, you better find a way to make more money then. Or find other ways to pay. Yoon's voice became threatening. Some girls work extra jobs for me. Private jobs, if you know what I mean. Jiwon's hands clenched into fists. Agent Moon had to put a hand on his arm to keep him calm. What happens if I cannot pay? Kira asked. Bad things. Very bad things. Yoon grabbed Kira's arm roughly. Let me tell you about a blue girl who thought she was too good to pay me. I had to teach her some manners. Now she walks with a limp and knows better than to argue with me. You hurt someone? I hurt anyone who does not follow the rules. And the rules are simple. Pay me every week, do what I tell you, and keep your mouth shut. Break the rules and you will regret it. Yoon squeezed Kira's arm harder. I have friends in high places who help me keep order in this colony. The colonial administrator knows about my work and supports it. Even some judges understand that refugees need firm guidance. This was even better than they had hoped. Yoon was confessing to assault and naming other corrupt officials. How many refugees pay you? Kira asked, trying to sound curious rather than investigative. Most of the smart ones. Maybe 30 families right now. That is 1,500 credits every week, plus special payments when people cause trouble. Yoon laughed. Not bad for keeping the peace. What about refugees who try to report you to other authorities? Yoon's face became dark and angry. That would be very stupid. I have connections everywhere. Complaints disappear and people who make them have accidents. Serious accidents. Agent Moon was recording everything. They now had confessions to extortion, assault, corruption of government officials, and witness intimidation. This was enough to destroy Yoon and everyone connected to him. But then something went wrong. Sheriff Captain Do-ha Park walked around the corner and saw Yoon talking to Kira. Ji-won had always believed Captain Park was honest, but now he was not sure. Yoon, Captain Park called out. What are you doing? Just talking to a new refugee about colony regulations, Yoon replied, releasing Kira's arm. Captain Park studied Kira carefully. I have not seen you before. When did you arrive? Last week, Kira said, sticking to her story. Strange. I thought I knew about all new arrivals. Captain Park looked suspicious. What is your full name? Ji-won could see the situation becoming dangerous. If Captain Park was also corrupt, Kira could be in serious trouble. Kira Vel, she answered honestly. Captain Park's expression changed immediately. Vel? Are you related to Mira Choi, who works for the Silent Rancher? Kira hesitated for a moment. She is my sister. Your sister. Captain Park looked at Deputy Yoon with growing anger. And why exactly are you discussing colony regulations with the sister of someone who has never caused any problems? Deputy Yoon suddenly realized he might have made a mistake. Just routine welcome for new residents. Routine. Captain Park stepped closer to Yoon. Since when do you personally welcome refugees? And why were you grabbing her arm? Agent Moon spoke into his radio. This is getting complicated. Be ready to move. Commander Cha's voice came back. My teams are in position. Captain Park continued questioning Yoon. You know what, Deputy? I think I should hear more about these colony regulations you were explaining. Yoon was starting to look nervous. It was nothing important. Oh, I think it was very important. Captain Park turned to Kira. Miss Vel, would you mind telling me exactly what Deputy Yoon said about staying safe in our colony? Kira looked scared for real now. She did not know if Captain Park could be trusted, but she had no choice. He said I needed to pay him 50 credits every week for protection. He said bad things would happen if I did not pay. Captain Park's face became furious. Did he now? And did he mention what kind of bad things? He said he hurt my sister when she could not pay. He said he has hurt other refugees too. Captain Park turned to face Deputy Yoon completely. Is this true, Deputy? Yoon realized he was trapped. Captain Park was clearly not part of his corruption network, and Kira had recorded everything he said. That girl is lying, Yoon said desperately. She is trying to cause trouble. Really? Then you would not mind if I searched you for any unexplained money? Captain Park stepped closer. And you would not mind if I interviewed other refugees about their experiences with you? Deputy Yoon suddenly pulled out his gun and pointed it at Kira. Nobody moves, he shouted. This whole thing is a setup. Someone has been investigating me. Agent Moon spoke urgently into his radio. All units move now. Suspect is armed and threatening the witness. Commander Cha's soldiers appeared from both ends of the street, their weapons drawn. Agent Moon and Ji-won ran toward the confrontation from their truck. Drop your weapon, Deputy Yoon, Commander Cha called out through a speaker. You are surrounded by Colonial Defense Force troops. Yoon looked around wildly. He was trapped, but he still held his gun pointed at Kira. This is not over, he screamed. You have no idea how deep this goes. Important people will not let you destroy everything we have built. Captain Park drew his own weapon and pointed it at Yoon. "Deputy Yoon, you are under arrest for extortion, assault, and threatening a witness. Drop your weapon immediately." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Yoon made his final mistake. He turned his gun toward Captain Park. Commander Cha's soldiers fired immediately. Deputy Yoon fell to the ground, wounded but alive. As medical teams rushed to treat Yoon, Agent Moon helped Kira remove the recording device from her jacket. "You did perfectly," he told her. "We have everything we need to bring down the entire corruption network." Ji-won reached them and put a protective arm around Kira. "Are you hurt?" "No, just scared." She looked at the wounded deputy being loaded into an ambulance. "Is it really over?" Agent Moon smiled. "For Deputy Yoon, yes. But this is just the beginning." He named several other corrupt officials. "We have a lot more arrests to make." Captain Park walked over to them, holstering his weapon. "I owe you all an apology. I knew something was wrong with Yoon, but I never imagined it was this bad. You are not part of the corruption?" Ji-won asked. "Absolutely not. And now that we have evidence, I will make sure every corrupt official in this colony faces justice." As the sun set over New Seoul Colony, the first phase of the operation was complete. Deputy Yoon was in custody, his crimes recorded and proven. But Agent Moon was right. This was just the beginning. The silent rancher had started something that would change everything. 3 months had passed since Deputy Yoon's arrest. The investigation that began with one silent rancher noticing his maid's injuries had grown into the largest corruption case in the colony's history. Agent Moon had worked day and night to follow every lead from Yoon's confession. The corrupt network was bigger than anyone had imagined. Colonial Administrator Kim Sang-woo had been taking bribes to ignore refugee complaints. Judge In Soo-kang had been dismissing cases against Yoon without proper hearings. Even some clerks in the government offices had been paid to lose paperwork and destroy evidence. All of them were now in galactic prison, waiting for their trials. Ji-won Kim sat on his ranch porch, drinking his morning coffee and watching the sunrise. The view was the same as always, but everything else had changed. His small ranch had become famous across the galaxy as the place where one human's quiet determination had brought down an entire criminal organization. News. Reporters from dozens of worlds had come to interview him. Government officials had offered him awards and honors. The Zilithian government had sent a special ambassador to thank him personally for protecting their people. Ji-won had accepted the thanks politely, but he did not want fame or glory. He just wanted his life to return to normal. "Good morning, Mr. Kim," Mira said as she came out of the house carrying 2 cups of coffee. She moved normally now, with no trace of the limp that had first caught Ji-won's attention. Her bruises had healed completely, and more importantly, the fear had left her eyes. She smiled often now and spoke without worry. "Morning, Mira. How are the new residents settling in?" Mira sat down in the chair next to his. Over the past 2 months, Ji-won's ranch had grown into something much bigger than a simple cattle operation. With help from the Zilithian government and galactic refugee organizations, he had built a resettlement center for displaced refugees from many different worlds. 23 refugee families now lived in small houses scattered across his land. They worked together raising crops and animals while learning skills that would help them build new lives. Children played in the yards while their parents attended classes in English, colonial law, and practical job training. "Everyone is doing well," Mira replied. "The children are excited about starting school next week in town, and 3 more families have found permanent jobs and will be moving to their own homes soon." This made Ji-won happy. The goal was not to keep refugees dependent on his help forever, but to give them a safe place to heal and learn, while they built independent lives. "And how is Kira doing with her new job?" Mira smiled proudly. "She loves working for Agent Moon. He says she has natural talent for investigation work." After the corruption case ended, Agent Moon had offered Kira a position as a trainee investigator with the Galactic Investigation Bureau. She had accepted immediately, excited to help other people who faced injustice like her community had suffered. "She wants to make sure no one else goes through what we experienced," Mira continued. "She says humans taught her that one person can make a difference if they refuse to give up." A vehicle approached on the road leading to the ranch. Ji-won recognized Commander Cha's military transport. She visited regularly to check on the refugee center and had become a good friend. Commander Cha stepped out of her vehicle and walked toward the porch. She moved with the same quiet confidence as always, but today her expression was more serious than usual. "Good morning, G1. Mira." She sat down in the third chair that was always kept ready for visitors. "I have news from the galactic capital." "Good news or bad news?" G1 asked. "Good news mostly. The corruption trials are finished. Every single person connected to Yoon's network has been convicted and sentenced to prison. How long will they serve? Deputy Yoon got 25 years. Administrator Kim got 15 years. Judge Kang got 12 years. The others got between 5 and 10 years each." Commander Cha accepted a cup of coffee from Mira. "They will also have to pay compensation to every refugee family they hurt." This was good news indeed. Justice had been served, and the victims would receive some payment for their suffering. "There is more," Commander Cha continued. "The Galactic Council has approved new laws to protect refugees from this kind of abuse. Every colony will now have independent advocates for refugee rights, and corruption cases will automatically go to galactic courts instead of local judges. That means this will not happen again in other places," Mira said with satisfaction. "That is the idea. Your case has changed how the galaxy handles refugee protection." Commander Cha turned to G1. "And there is something else. The Galactic Council wants to give you the Medal of Interspecies Justice. It is the highest award for someone who protects people from different species." G1 was quiet for a moment. "Do I have to go to the capital to receive it?" "They would prefer a ceremony there, but they will bring it here if you want. Here would be better." "I do not like leaving the ranch," Commander Cha smiled. "I thought you might say that. The ceremony is scheduled for next month. Representatives from 12 different worlds will attend." After Commander Cha left, Ji-won and Mira sat quietly on the porch. In the distance, they could see refugee children playing with some of Ji-won's cattle. The animals were gentle and seemed to enjoy the attention. "Do you ever regret getting involved?" Mira asked. "Your quiet life became very complicated." Ji-won thought about this question. His life had indeed become more complicated. He now managed a large refugee center instead of a simple ranch. Government officials called him regularly for advice on refugee issues. News reporters still visited occasionally to write stories about his work. But when he looked at the children playing safely in his fields, when he saw families working together without fear, when he watched Mira smile without worry, he knew the answer. "No regrets," he said simply. "The other refugees call you a hero, you know." Ji-won shook his head. "I am not a hero. I just noticed that someone I cared about was being hurt. Any decent person would have done the same thing, but not everyone would have succeeded. You did not give up when the problem seemed too big to solve. Humans do not give up on people under our protection. That is just how we are built." That evening, Ji-won walked through his expanded ranch as the sun set. He visited the new houses where refugee families were preparing dinner and helping their children with homework. He checked on the animals that were now cared for by workers from 6 different species. He stopped by the workshop where refugees learned practical skills that would help them find good jobs. Everything was peaceful and productive. This was what he had wanted when he first decided to help Mira, a place where people could live and work without fear. As he returned to his house, Elder Seo approached him. The old Zilithian had become the informal leader of the refugee community and helped coordinate their activities. "Ji-won, I wanted to thank you again for everything you have done for us. You have thanked me many times." "Elder Seo, it is not necessary. But I want you to understand something important. When humans first began exploring space, many species were worried about your aggressive reputation. We heard stories about human wars and violence." Elder Seo looked around at the peaceful community that had grown up around them. "But what we learned from you is different. Yes, humans can be aggressive when they need to fight. But you fight for justice, not conquest. You fight to protect others, not to gain power for yourselves." The old Zilithian placed a gentle hand on Ji-won's shoulder. "Word of what you did here has spread to every species in the galaxy. Now when people hear about humans, they do not think of warriors. They think of protectors. They think of people who will not allow injustice to continue, no matter how powerful the criminals are." Ji-won was quiet for a moment. "I just did what needed to be done." "Exactly. And that is why humans are respected throughout the galaxy now, because when something needs to be done to help others, humans do it." As Elder Seo walked back to his house, Ji-won stood alone under the alien stars. He had never intended to change anything beyond his own ranch. He had simply noticed that his maid was limping and decided to find out why. But sometimes, as humans had learned throughout their history, small acts of decency could grow into something much larger. One person refusing to ignore injustice could inspire others to act. A single voice speaking truth could break down walls of lies and corruption. Ji-won Kim had always been known as the silent rancher. But his silence had ended the moment he decided that someone under his protection would not suffer alone. And in that decision, he had reminded the galaxy why humans were worth respecting.